Arata is the epitome of a hopeless loser. Despite being the muscular heir to a rich family, he scares away more girls than R. Kelly. But everything takes a turn when he discovers he was adopted and decides he's going to clap his stepsisters one after the other, then empty his cream filler all over them. It all begins when Arata, desperate for dating advice, turns to Shion for help. Shion tells him he just needs to go with the flow to land a girlfriend, but Arata snaps, admitting he has no idea what going with the flow even means. Shion, puzzled, asks why Arata is so bothered by girls when he could have any girl he wanted, being the heir. Arata, trying to cover up his lack of confidence, gives some nonsensical speech about true romance. But that's when his sisters appear, taking turns teasing him. Arata tells them to mind their own business, but Shion adds fuel to the fire, telling Oka that Arata has been beating his meat every night looking at her and how curvy she's getting in all the right places. After sending her dog to attack him, she tells him he needs help, since regular brothers don't obsess over their sisters' bodies. Arata then denies any of this is true, claiming that he sees them as ugly street dogs, until Oka brings up his infamous incident with Kotono. The tension rises as Banri, the eldest, steps in to defend him, and Minami, surprisingly, admits that Arata isn't all that bad. When Arata tries to hug her in gratitude, she punches him so hard his heart shifts gears. The chaos is interrupted when Oka reminds them that it's Kotono's birthday on Saturday. The group agrees to go out together after the dinner. They all catch the train to school the next day. Later, in the men's room, Shion talks with Arata about how everyone at school seems to think they have the perfect family, when in fact, they're all just bullied by their 5 sisters with no real way to fight back. Shion even mentions rumors that Arata and his sisters might be secretly juicing, to which Arata immediately shuts down the idea. Shion, however, reminds him of Kotono's earlier confession. Later, Arata contemplates sending a friend request to his crush, but backs out at the last second. Just as he's about to chicken out, Uka bursts in, asking for his notes. As she flips through them, Arata notices her melons have ripened more, and he tells her to act her age. Uka, undeterred, calls him stupid for thinking she should be more refined, especially since they all grew up in the same house. She then slyly asks about his crush, revealing that Shion told her all about it. Reluctantly, Arata shares the girl's name, explaining they're on the same committee. Oka tries to play matchmaker, but Arata snaps back, telling her she should focus on finding someone who can tolerate her personality first. A few days later, on Kotono's birthday, Arata suits up for the occasion, waiting for dinner before heading out. When he sees Oka, she gives him a rare compliment, and they both head downstairs for the dinner. However, things take a turn when Minami, in a fit of frustration, apologizes for losing her AirPod. The argument quickly escalates until Arata steps in to break it up. Their dad, Kaname, arrives and thanks everyone for waiting. Just as they toast to Kotono, Kaname drops a bombshell. Everyone at the table is adopted. Arata, stunned, immediately demands an explanation. Kaname elaborates, revealing that while Minami and Shion are twins, the rest of them have no blood relation. He confesses he promised their mother to keep this a secret until the right time. After dropping the truth, he continues the dinner as if nothing happened, but everyone is visibly unsettled. A maid tries to serve them tea, but Banri stops her and takes over, serving them herself. Uka starts to voice her betrayal, but Seiha and Minami urge her to stop overthinking it. They ask Banri if she knew about the adoption, given that she's been around the longest. Banri, however, claims to have forgotten much of their childhood and reassures them that being adopted doesn't change anything about their family bond. With that, they head inside to rest, but after a few minutes of contemplation, Arata decides to clear his mind with a bath. As Arata stares at the pile of treasure in the laundry basket, he starts to realize that nothing in his life has really changed. That is until his gaze locks with Kotono's in the bath. Panicking, he quickly apologizes and tries to leave, but she asks him to scrub her back. Stuck, he does as she requests. Meanwhile, Shion and Oka are having a conversation about how the family's sudden revelation about their adoption might affect the way Uka has always treated Arata like a twin brother. Shion points out that the real concern is how society will react when the truth becomes public. Back in the bath, Kotono halts Arata from leaving him frozen in place, worried that she might want him to relieve her stress. He struggles to keep his composure. Shion, talking to Uka, suggests that they could start a family harem since there are no laws preventing unrelated siblings from marrying. Uka is horrified by the suggestion and accuses Shion of just waiting for an opportunity to unleash his creepy side. He quickly tries to backtrack, claiming he only thinks of her as a sister, which Uka somewhat naively believes. They shift the conversation to the night Arata told her to cover up her juicy melons, and Uka shudders at the memory. Shion, defending Arata, tells Uka to cut him some slack and asks if she knows what really happened between Arata and Kotono. Shion refuses to share the details, having promised Arata to keep it a secret. Uka, confident that nothing inappropriate happened, explains that they've all just been teasing Arata. Shion finally admits that Kotono confessed her feelings to Arata that night and refused to accept his rejection. When Arata tried to push her away, the others entered the game room and misunderstood, thinking he was the one making a move on her. To avoid further trouble, Arata only told Shion and kept it from the girls. Uka, upon hearing this, insists they need to intervene with Kotono, but Shion reminds her that Kotono is still young and may simply be confusing respect with love. Uka, annoyed, tells him to stop pretending to be some kind of sage. Shion, after considering the situation, agrees that Kotono's feelings could grow stronger, especially now that the truth about their family is out in the open. Back in the bath, Arata asks Kotono if the steam is getting to her head. In response, she doubles down on her confession, insisting she won't give up on him. When Arata tells her that nothing could ever happen between them, she replies that she understands the consequences of loving a brother, yet refuses to let go. Arata, frustrated, pulls her away and explains that she's just confused. He promises to keep looking out for her until she matures enough to understand her emotions. Then, before he empties his clip in her chamber, he decides to keep the incident a secret and turns to leave. But as he exits, Kotono calls him heartless for being both cold and caring at the same time. Meanwhile, Kaname tries to convince himself that tearing the family apart was worth it because of the promise he made to his wife. Banri interrupts his thoughts, reminding him of the situation. Arata returns to his room and finds Seiha lounging on his bed. He asks if she got lost, and she asks where he is coming from. When he lies, saying he just needed a walk, she doesn't buy it. Seiha, in her usual manner, starts talking about how they all played rock, paper, scissors to assign rooms, and how he ended up with the smallest one, while Uka got the largest. She continues talking about the random experiences they've all shared as a family, and Arata tries to connect this conversation to her sudden curiosity about his room. Without warning, Seiha pushes him onto the bed and leans in to monitor his heart rate.
失礼。静かにしてください。これは極秘事項なので。
As Arata wonders if he should just give in at this point, Seiya tells him that he's not the creepy guy she once thought he was. He asks her why she's trying to turn him into one, and when she mentions being in the bath when Kotono ambushed him, he instinctively pushes her off. Seiya commends him for keeping his composure despite the tempting situation. She suggests that Kotono may simply be confusing sibling love with something deeper. However, Seiha also points out that their father's sudden confession might have pushed Kotono to the brink of losing her sanity. Arata is still trying to figure out why Kotono's actions led her to suddenly straddle him, and Seiha explains that it was her way of making sure he didn't see them as anything other than siblings, even if they weren't really related. When Arata asks why she couldn't have used a less unsettling method, Seiha claims it was the easiest way, insisting she doesn't have any romantic feelings for him. She reminds him that, without the sibling bond, they could end up in some pretty messed up situations. Despite her teasing, she reminds him that she expects a bit more respect since she's his older sister. She tells him at the very least to call her something sexy. Then, she leaves but pauses outside his room to make sure that nothing about her experiment has triggered any unwanted feelings. Just as she convinces herself that their closeness meant nothing, Minami shows up and asks what she's doing outside Arata's room. Seiha brushes it off, claiming it's nothing, and walks away. The next morning, Arata wakes up with the weight of their new reality pressing on him. As he gets ready for school, he bumps into Banri in a lab uniform with Kotono, and he asks, "Have you finally lost it?" Banri explains that she was just trying it on, and then jokingly asks if he likes how it highlights the shape of her body. Arata calls her stupid for asking such a question so early in the day, but Banri tells Kotono not to worry about Arata's apparent dislike of them. He tries to apologize, but gets even more confused when Banri attempts to strip Kotono in front of him. Shion, overhearing the exchange, tells Arata that Banri was probably just trying to lighten the mood, hoping to return things to normal. Later, as they walk to school, two random guys talks about the girls, calling them the perfect family and commenting on how much of a baddie they are. Arata and Shion both realize that the girls have mastered the art of acting like everything is normal, even though the truth is bound to come out. The girls continue with their day at school, acting like nothing has changed. Meanwhile, Arata spends the entire day brooding until the last period. When he arrives at his locker to pack up, he repeats to himself that the girls are still his sisters, trying to keep his mind from wandering into uncomfortable territory. Just then, Minami approaches him, and he asks if she skipped practice. She replies that she has the day off for once. As they walk together, Arata compliments her on maintaining her consistency with training, despite the pressure of being the school's hottest tennis star. As she tries to return the compliment, 3 girls run up to her, asking for pictures and fawning over her like obsessed fans. Once they leave, Arata asks why girls are so drawn to her, and Minami explains that a photo she took in a guy's uniform made other girls think she has a thing for clapping girls. Arata wonders why he's never had such luck and suggests they go out to enjoy her day off, but Minami reveals that her coach gave her the day off because she failed a placement test. This causes Arata to remember that Minami has always been a coconut head, so he offers to help her study before taking her to a restaurant. As they sit down, he notices her face closely, realizing why almost everyone seems to want to eat whipped cream off her treasure chest. Seiha then asks for a more detailed explanation of the challenging parts, and as Arata breaks it down in a way that her restless mind can comprehend, she becomes distracted. Once he finishes explaining, she pretends to absorb every word as if it's etched into her mind. He tests her knowledge right away, only to watch her fail every single question. Sighing, he begins to accept that she might be beyond help, but then Namwang. She grabs the microphone and starts singing, completely winning him over with her carefree attitude. They leave the restaurant shortly after, but on their way home, he catches sight of his crush with someone else, making him immediately hide in embarrassment. Minami eventually admits that singing with him was actually a lot of fun, but he quickly reminds her that they were supposed to be focused on improving her rapidly declining test scores. Minami, shifting the topic, mentions how their dinner with Kaname was chaotic. She asks for his opinion on the situation and suggests they should have a conversation with him again to uncover the truth about their real parents. Minami expresses concern for Kotono, who is the youngest and seems especially sensitive. Arata starts to think that Minami isn't entirely useless after all, but he warns her to keep everything a secret so they don't draw unwanted attention. She reassures him that not being biological siblings doesn't change the bond they've built as a family. Her words cause Arata to feel more confident in her, but then she suddenly tells him not to stress over his crush, already giving another the Glock 3000. Arata, taken aback, asks how she knows that, and she casually mentions that Oka spilled the details of his tragic love life. She then suggests that Arata should focus on being a good older brother instead of worrying about losing his virginity. After patting his head and telling him to cheer up, Minami asks if they can play a game at home, but he refuses and tells her to focus on fixing whatever is wrong in her own mind. Back at the house, Minami gives Uka a box of cakes and hands over her lost AirPods, apologizing for losing them. Uka gives them back to her as a hand-me-down, then scolds her to be more careful next time. Uka asks for help with the cakes since she can't possibly eat them all by herself. Several days later, Arata finishes his morning routine and heads out, but he runs into Kotono, who greets him briefly before walking away without saying anything else. He wonders if she might be over her strange feelings for him. Just then, Seiha surprises him, reminding him to show her respect, like she mentioned the other night. Arata reassures her that there's nothing to worry about with Kotono, but before he can relax, Minami jumps in, like she had 10 Red Bull, and brings up how she humiliated him the previous night in the game room. She calls him Senpai, and Seiha, looking confused, asks why. Minami explains that he always tries to act like he's some wise, all-knowing figure. At school later that morning, Arata spots Lala from across the hall and tries to avoid her. Oka suddenly whispers, "I love you," in his ear. Arata pulls back in shock, concerned that she might be losing her mind. When he asks her why she said it, she teases him, asking if he's ever told Lala the same words. Arata protests, saying that doing so would be completely embarrassing, especially since Lala would just reject him for her boyfriend. Oka laughs, telling him that his overthinking will keep him single until his tiny sword shrivels up like dried grapes. Her friends call out to her, so she runs off to join them, leaving Arata standing there watching her. She begins discussing plans to take Kotono out to the park to celebrate her birthday, even offering to play Cupid and find a match for each of them. Her friends treat her like royalty, which causes Arata to wonder what would happen if he ever revealed how she acts like a completely unhinged person. One of the girls sneaks a glance at Arata and comments that he's surprisingly handsome. The others follow suit, admitting they've always been too intimidated by his physical appearance to notice how attractive he really is. When one of them jokes about becoming Uka's sister-in-law, Uka quickly dismisses the idea, saying Arata wouldn't know how to treat a lady. She calls him a gorilla who may have evolved physically, but still has a peanut brain. However, as she continues to talk, she starts listing his good qualities, like how organized he can be, and begins to compliment him more than she intended. Before she knows it, her face turns as red as a Carolina Reaper. When they ask about her blushing, she quickly changes the subject and claims they're late for class, walking off in a hurry. Arata, lost in thought, hopes nothing weird will happen when they all go to the park later. Days later, they finally arrive at the park, excited about the day ahead. Banri reminds everyone to stay together to ensure Kotono enjoys the day. As soon as the mascot appears, Manami dashes off with Uka, leaving Banri and Arata behind. The two beg the others to stay put while they go get food. A few minutes later, they return to find that the others have completely vanished, not even bothering to stay with the mascot. Banri and Arata sit down to wait, but after a while, he gives up trying to reach them. Banri, in an attempt to cheer him up, suggests they go on a date. Arata protests, reminding her that they're supposed to be celebrating Kotono's birthday, but she brushes it off, saying they'll run into the others eventually. She makes him eat all the food by himself while grabbing his arm and joking about how happy she is to be on a date with a self-proclaimed wannabe Riz god like him. Arata, still ignoring her compliments, focuses on her chest, which she notices. She teases him, asking if her melons is keeping his arm warm. He tries to play stupid, but then tells him to stop pretending like he's not interested in her body. Trying to maintain some self-control, Arata pulls away, but is still distracted by the number of admirers staring at her. Banri then promises that he'll get to grab her when they return home, but he acts uninterested. As they climb a flight of stairs, he struggles to keep his thoughts in check, slipping at the last step. Afterwards, they get on a ride, and Arata spends most of the time trying not to lose his lunch. Eventually, he contacts Shion, who informs him that the others are on the other side of the park. He's surprised when Shion tells the rest of the girls where they are. Uka immediately accuses them of abandoning Kotono to go practice baby making. Seiha points out that they're the ones who ran off first. The group discusses how Banri seems to be taking every chance to tease Arata, but when Uka notices how Kotono is reacting, she shifts the topic and asks which ride Kotono wants to go on next. Arata and Banri find a quiet spot to take a break, and Arata decides to ask her how she's been coping with their father's confession. She admits that it's been troubling, but she needs more answers from him before making any decisions. She notices the strange look on his face and asks if there's something else on his mind. But Arata, unsure how she'll react to what happened with Kotono and Seiha, decides to keep it to himself. Instead, he says he just wants their relationship as siblings to stay the same. As she rubs his head affectionately, Arata tells her to stop, suddenly remembering that she's always been overprotective. She assures him she will continue to protect their family, but before she can get up, a random girl slips and spills her drink. Arata quickly steps in to help, telling the girl not to worry, while Banri dries off the mess. He reassures her that he'll help protect their siblings. Shortly after, Shion and the girls arrive and ask why Arata's soaking wet. He explains what happened to ease their concerns. Manami suggests one final ride before they leave, and on their way, Banri grabs Arata's hand so they can run inside together. They finally finish the rides just as the sun sets, but Uka insists on keeping the celebration going with a performance, assisted by Minami. Arata suddenly announces that he needs to use the restroom, and Shion and Kotono decide to join him. Once they're far enough away, Seiha tells the others what happened between Kotono and Arata the other night. At first, they dismiss it as a joke, but when Seiha describes exactly what she witnessed in the bath, the group goes from disbelief to genuine concern. They all try to blame Arata, saying he couldn't keep his sausage under control, but Seiha reassures them that Arata was the victim. She explains how she managed to calm Kotono down, ensuring him that nothing inappropriate happened. When Uka asks how she can be so sure, Seiha casually explains how she had rubbed her golden box on Arata and monitored his heart rate to see if his glizzy would react. Banri is shocked that Arata stayed calm, but Uka is left trying to process what she just heard. Seiha suggests they all keep this quiet so Kotono doesn't feel embarrassed, but just then, Uka decides to share the gaming room incident, which changes the direction of the conversation. They begin to realize that Kotono might have genuine feelings for Arata. Seiha theorizes that the recent revelation from their father might have pushed her to fully embrace her feelings. Banri, however, insists that it's just a phase and that it'll pass if Arata doesn't act foolishly. She mentions that after their dinner with their father, she couldn't stop thinking about everything and went back to ask him a few more questions. The others press her for more details, but she only reveals that they were all orphans and that her parents were never found. The group agrees to keep the situation under wraps unless Kotono acts out. When Arata returns with Shion and Minami, they all start heading home. He feels confident that their bond won't be affected by one strange bathroom moment. Later, while waiting outside a store, Arata sees someone who looks like Lala and panics. Uka comes out to check on him, and they end up taking a walk together. At one point, she stops and says they need to talk about the fact that they were never actually twins, but Arata tells her not to bother, insisting that he will always see her as his twin sister. She continues talking about how they used to believe in twin telepathy, before suddenly blurting out that she loves him.